Hello, everyone. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. The Hey Chaplain podcast is the place where members of the law enforcement community share their wisdom and experience through me, the chaplain, so that they can encourage others who wear the badge. As a football fan, nothing makes me more nervous than when the ball carrier is hemmed in, but you can tell by his body language that he's looking to lateral the ball to a teammate. That lateral is a high-risk move, and it can make or break the game. Likewise, in law enforcement, feeling hemmed in and trapped can lead to a decision, perhaps an emotional decision, to make a lateral transfer to another department. But how do you know if you should lateral? Will that move be the thing that saved your law enforcement career, or will it just make you miserable? Today, we're talking to Captain Steve Smith. He has almost 30 years in law enforcement, including a pretty big lateral move from a small department to one 10 times bigger about midway through. I asked Steve to come talk to you today about the pros and cons of making a lateral. Here is Stephen Smith. Hello, Steve. How are you today?
I'm well.
Good. I'm glad you're here. I want to talk to you today about moving from one department to another department, about making a lateral transfer. And so can you tell me your story?
Sure. I grew up here in Kansas City, Kansas, went to college, both Kansas City, Kansas Community College, then went to UMKC, hit the law enforcement market in the early 90s, which was a very, very competitive market back then. So you'd have about 1,000 people apply for one position at an agency. So it was a very frustrating time.
Very competitive.
Very super competitive. A lot of times you'd have huge auditoriums full of guys in suits trying to apply for just a handful of positions. So I was getting into law enforcement about that time, kind of papered all of the metro area with applications. So I ended up actually applying with KCMO and got close to I was in the hiring process, but ended up getting hired by Liberty, Missouri.
Okay.
So I went to Liberty, Missouri, was a police officer there for 13 years, and then I kind of hit a brick wall. My career hit a brick wall, so
Let me ask you about Liberty for a moment. So
Sure.
Liberty is a suburb of Kansas City, Missouri.
Yes,
And
it is.
so
It is
smaller town.
Smaller town, northwest. Actually, very historic. Jesse James robbed his first bank there.
That's wonderful.
First day late bank robbery, and that was something that they reenact every single year. So definitely had a small town vibe, but it was also a suburb part
Right.
of the metropolitan area, and so it had kind of a rural feel, but very suburban feel to it.
How big a department at the time you were there?
I think there was about 40 of us.
Okay.
The population was around 25,000. It has increased since then. It's definitely become more as the Northland grew, that corridor
Sure.
on 152 highway. I mean, it's a lot of strip malls and Chipotles and everything else now. So the town changed a little bit more. It's definitely more suburban now than it was when I first got there.
But at the time, 90s up into the 2000s, relatively small town, relatively small suburb in the metro.
Yeah, but going through transformation.
Sure.
Since I left, they added another high school, so they had a kind
wow.
of a athletic powerhouse, but a lot of suburban big homes coming in. So yeah, it was definitely a town in transition, even the time from when I started to when I finally left.
What kind of stuff did you do at Liberty?
Well, had the opportunity to do quite a few things. Liberty was very progressive. At the time, they wouldn't even talk to you unless you had 60 hours of college credit.
Oh, wow.
Most of us had bachelor's degrees. I knew some that had master's degrees. So very well educated department. I think they were on their second or third computer report system at the time. We're talking early 90s.
Pretty good. Yeah.
So very good.
It's like the early days of email.
Yeah, very much.
They were already,
they were already kind of doing those sorts of things. We were doing computer reports. So pretty progressive on that way, or at least on that end of things. Early on, I became a detective, which was a rotational job. I did that.
Okay.
I was a field training officer. I was on our bike patrol program, which was part of community policing for 3 years. Had the opportunity to do a lot of interdiction type training. Went to Metro Squad school twice while I was there. I helped start the SWAT team. I also went to a lot of classes and received a lot of training in Spanish for law enforcement. Some of that was self-taught, but I also went through a lot of training.
Sure.
So there was definitely an opportunity to send us to a lot of training, and I tried to avail myself of that as much as I could.
Is that a normal thing for a smaller department that you would get to sit in so many seats on the bus? I mean, there's a lot of variety there.
Well, you do need that because chances are you just don't have a lot of people to fill some of these roles. So you had a lot of people wearing a lot of different hats. I was super interested in the SWAT stuff, so when it came time, they finally decided, hey, we need a SWAT team. I was one of the people they reached out to. I went to some of the early training. I got the equipment, was involved in training with other agencies, and this was for probably about a year or two before we even became active.
Okay.
So that was something I was super interested in. I went through FBI instructor development school to teach classes. So I was, I had a role as a teacher. I was the racial profiling instructor.
Okay.
Because Missouri passed a law that every year departments had to have an hour of racial profiling training. So I compiled all the numbers. We had to compile all that data, and so I broke it down per our department, and I did that training for other departments as well because their guys needed training, so I filled that role as well.
Oh, wow. So you're doing a lot of different things, a lot of very interesting things, but before I interrupted you, you said that you were hitting a wall.
I did.
And so what wall did you hit?
The wall is as far as the advancement of my career. It's like I was a patrolman. I was a detective for a year, but it was a rotational thing. I tried to get back in, but that was a little competitive. Other guys want to do the same thing. I mean, with a small department, you've only got so many jobs that you can fill. I think they had like 3 detectives. So everybody's wanting to do those jobs. So
right.
Sometimes you're coming up against some very qualified people, some very good people who have just as much experience and education as I have, and sometimes a little bit more, and are better suited for that job. So because you have a limited amount of opportunities, I mean, you're going to fall short sometimes.
Yeah.
And it definitely bottlenecks. An agency that small bottlenecks when it comes to promotions.
Yeah.
So it finally got to a point where I had enough time on the department to test for sergeant. So I studied really hard. I, really hit the books. I mean, they give you training material, or they give you reading material to look at and things that you should know. You learn all the laws and stuff like that. So I tested for sergeant, made number 3 on the list. Well, here in KCK, you make number 3 on the list, you're guaranteed.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to be a sergeant.
You'll be promoted almost immediately.
So that was a 2-year list. I made number 3 on the list, and they only promoted 1 person. So, you spent all that time sitting on the list and didn't get promoted. I tested again later, and still kind of the same thing. And there are no opportunities. I mean, if
once the spot gets filled, it stays filled for a long time.
Yeah. So you're waiting on the list, you're waiting for somebody to retire, but if they don't, and the list dies and you have to start all over again, and it just got to a point where it's like, am I willing to wait another 2 more years or longer to have maybe a chance? Because I'd done a lot of the stuff I'd wanted to do. There really wasn't a lot of other things to do. There were really no other units within the department for me to go to. I mean, it was patrol or back to the bureau, and that was a competitive job, and it just didn't appear to me. I was 36 years old, so my time frame was really kind of running out to where it becomes to the point where you're really doing damage to yourself, and you've been on an apartment too long. I was vested by that time. In Missouri, you're vested at 10 years.
Okay.
So I was going to get some sort of a retirement, but I just didn't want to retire as a patrolman. I wanted to advance in my career, and I just wasn't going to be able to do that there. Okay.
So tell me about the decision. You're going to leave and go to another department. What does that look like? What did that look like for you?
Well, what it looked like for me, and I wasn't the only one doing this. I mean, there were other officers at Liberty, Missouri that went to other agencies, but most of them went to the feds.
Okay.
Which that was always a possibility. Now, I was hitting that age to where I wouldn't be able to go to the feds because I think the cutoff was a lot younger than it is now, but it was still, I mean, the feds, they practice a little bit of age discrimination there. Once you hit a certain age, they don't want you anymore.
Right.
So I was definitely getting close to that age, but I had children here. My wife was from here. I was from here. My children, her folks, my folks lived here. So I had established roots here.
Yeah. Didn't want to leave the KC Metro if you didn't have to.
No, because there's a good chance if you get on with the feds, unless you finish number 1 in your class, you're probably going to move. And if you're lucky, you might move someplace like St. Louis or Springfield or something, but there's also a good chance you might get stationed in Walla Walla or,
right.
down somewhere.
The proverbial Timbuktu.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So what different places locally did you look at?
None really. I was going through this kind of rough time in my career. I had some friends that I have known in law enforcement that I went to church with, guys that I had known for a long time. So I had talked to a couple of different people from Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. I am from here. So a lot of the culture shock of coming to KCK for me just didn't exist. This was home.
Sure.
So really it was going to be a better move for us. I mean, it was going to put me, us closer, both my wife and I, closer to our families. The kids were going to be closer to the schools because they were attending private school here in KCK at the time.
Right.
So really for us, logistically, it made a lot of sense. There was a commander, he's since retired, but he was a friend of mine. And one day I'm kind of sitting at church, waiting for things to begin, and he handed me a brochure that had, the pay scale and everything else. And I looked at that and I'm like, wow. Just the opportunities were there. Now, I did take about a $12,000 a year pay cut to come here, but I made it up within 2 years.
Okay.
And I'm making...
So temporary setback financially.
There was a temporary setback, and we knew that going into it, and we just kind of sucked it up. And, unfortunately, around that same time is when the housing crisis hit. So we did have a hard time selling our house up in the Northland in Missouri because we had to move to KCK. We had to move to Wyandotte County. That was
right. Some agencies require that. You got to live within...
And here, you have to live in Wyandotte County. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, and so we knew we had to do that, and so we were kind of bit the bullet a little bit and did it.
Okay. When you came over, how did the transfer process go? I mean, you had to start over in a way, didn't you?
I did. At the time, the program we had, there really was no such thing as lateral transfers. It was you get hired here. Now, I'm sure that my experience helped me in the hiring process, but when it came to actually getting hired, I went through the entire process just like a brand new officer would.
The academy and everything.
I went through a full 6-month academy. And
at what age?
36, turning 37 in the academy. So I was certainly the old man in the academy. There were a couple of what we call prior law enforcement, prior LEOs is what they called us. But I had the most experience by pretty far.
Sure.
Another, Brad Lancaster, who was killed in the line of duty several years ago, he was in my class, and he had like 10 years on, but I had 13. And
yeah.
So
what was that like going through an academy where you might have an equal or more experience than the people training you?
You have to be careful.
Yes.
Okay. They certainly knew my qualifications. But I also understood that I'm here to learn. I'm here. This is job related. This is, it's like an interview the whole time. In the academy, it's rough because I'm one of the probably the few people in the metro, a handful of us that have been through actually both academies, KCMOs and KCKs, because Liberty sent us to Kansas City, Missouri's academy, and that was a 6-month academy. So I've spent a whole year of my career in the police academy as a student. So I kind of had been through that before. KCK's academy was a little bit more militant, discipline-wise.
Okay. So
it was a little different, but like I said, I'd already kind of been through that, so I knew probably the best thing to do is just kind of keep my mouth shut. I'm going to stand out just because I'm the oldest person in the room. The academy instructors were very experienced, but they, for the most part, as long as I kept my mouth shut and didn't try to exert any authority over them, they mostly left me alone.
Okay. Give me the kind of the 30,000-foot view on your career here at KCK then. You went through the academy, come out probably straight into patrol, I presume. How long before you advanced up? Well, and that's where it kind of paid off, is I obviously went through the academy, got through there, was placed briefly in South Patrol, South midnights, then to afternoons. Right after that, I was able to bid for the first time, which is kind of the annual thing here in December is patrol-wide. We were able to bid. When I came here, I kind of told myself, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this for real. You're working in KCK. This is a rough town, rough inner city environment. So I said that was my goal walking in there. I want to work in East Patrol, which is downtown, East, afternoons, in a mostly Hispanic district. That was my plan. So it came time. I'm standing in line. It came time for my turn to sign up, and there was 115s, which is, at the time, was east of 10th Street and south of Minnesota. And
afternoons, Thursday, Friday off, and I signed my name, and that's where I spent a couple of years. So it's exactly where I wanted to go, and that's where I went. I was there for a couple of years. Eventually bid up into the chief's office, or I didn't bid there. I was actually selected. The opportunity became available. And there are some jobs in the department that are chiefs picked where, hey, there's this opening. If you'd like to work here, submit a resume or something. Mm-hmm. So I did, and me and another academy classmate both were assigned to the chief's office. So we were there for about a year and a half. And while we were there, a lot of policy review.
There's just kind of a public information officer?
Yeah, that's part of it. We wore a lot of hats and we're really busy, but a PIO, the public information officer aspect, was certainly an important facet of it as well.
Okay. What was your first promotion?
After we got out of we did our time in the chief's office, but they were getting ready to promote for detective. Well, we had to have a minimum amount of road time, so we both had to go back out on the road to get our minimum amount of road time. Before, I think it was like 3 years. So we went back out and did that and tested for detective and made detective. So she went to child abuse and I went to, I think, property crimes. And so from there, I went through kind of a couple of different units in the detective unit. I started off in property crimes, which is generally just the place you start off.
Right.
Which we have a huge amount of property crimes in Kansas City, Kansas. So you get really busy really quick. Worked property crimes, went to internal affairs for about a year, came out and just did a couple of other different things, pawn shops, tow lots, missing persons, worked some missing persons for a while, eventually went to child abuse, and after serving in child abuse for a while, and in fact, I was the acting captain in there, and then got promoted to captain.
For you, it worked out pretty well to go from a department that was relatively small to one that was maybe not quite 10 times as big, from 40 to the mid 300s. Gave you some more opportunity. You eventually were able to make those advancements and promotions that you wanted. Worked out pretty well. But if someone were coming to you now and say, hey, I'm considering going to another agency, they're looking for guidance. What's the first thing you're asking these days?
I guess the first thing I would ask them is, what do you want? What are you looking for? What are your goals? For me, it was career advancement. I wanted to be able to do some different things. I wanted to be a detective.
Okay.
So the goals when I came here is, I want to work in the city for a while. I want to kind of earn my bones.
Sure. Prove yourself.
Prove myself. Well, to myself and to my coworkers. I felt that I had some things that I could add, that I could help them with. I felt that I could better serve my community because of my experience.
Yeah, you're bilingual, and there's some things you could offer, right?
And I was using that every single day. And for a while, I was certified bilingual on the department, so I was able to go and respond to different scenes and help with translation with Spanish. Eventually, my next goal is I wanted to be a detective and kind of explore some different things there. And as a detective in KCK, it's a very busy place, and there is a lot going on. And eventually, my goal was to make captain, and I did that. So I had to kind of set some new goals, but I'd like to do some different things too. I've been in operations for 3.5 years, but I'd like to go back to the bureau and do some different things and hopefully get promoted to major. As I'm getting towards the end of my career, I'm looking at doing some of those things before I retire. Sure.
So someone who's looking to move, do you think that the discontent that's driving that is because they're not able to promote, or do you feel like Is that a common reason for wanting to lateral?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Okay. They can't promote, or they're not able to do some of the things they want to do. They say they want to become a detective, and maybe even they've tested for it, but it's not moving as fast as they would like, which might be a generational thing to a certain degree.
Sure. So like impatient.
Yes. Yeah. So I tell some of those guys, and I have had people come to me and say, I'm really stuck in my career. What should I do? And I try to give them advice. I mean, I've even went so far as to rewrite letters that they were going to send to somebody. And it's like, well, instead of doing the whole whiny, hey, how come I don't get to do this? Instead, let's do the, what can I do to improve myself? So I've helped some guys with that sort of things. If you're wanting to do detective work, then when it comes to writing reports, make sure that you're writing really good reports. Make sure that you're actually interviewing the victims. As a detective at Liberty, I learned more about writing reports than I ever could in the academy because I learned what should go into a report, what shouldn't go into into a report, how to talk to people, how to get information. Some of the things that the guys can do, would be like write better reports. If you want to be a sergeant, make sure that you try to avail yourself of training opportunities. If something comes up, volunteer for it or ask, hey, can I take that class? And there have been some guys, I've known guys on this department and other departments that I've worked for that on their time off or like on vacation that would even go and attend training, law enforcement related training on their days off, on their vacation, just so that they can add that to their resume. They can, so that if the opportunity comes up to do a certain job, like a task force job, for instance, which is usually a chief's pick, you're writing dynamite reports out there. You're doing good work. You're, really on the ball. So that makes yourself a little bit more visible.
The list of things that people are going for, detective. I mean, I hear people in the academy say, I want to be a detective. I want to be a homicide detective. They want to be leaders. They want to get promoted. They want to be a dog handler or SWAT. Is there an ideal size of department that they should be looking at? I mean, how do you know if the department you're looking at is going to be able to provide that for you?
You don't. You're going to possibly go from being a big fish in a little pond till suddenly you're a guppy in the ocean. All right. So you're going to have to do some things. And I have seen some officers that came from smaller agencies to here, not naming names or really even agencies for that matter, but came from agencies similar to Liberty that came to KCK thinking, okay, I've hit the big time. It's time to be a rock star. And they get discouraged very quickly because they find out that you're, I won't say a nobody, but you're just another.
There's lots of talented people here.
Lots of talented people.
Yeah.
And
there's lots of people with connections.
There is that too. I mean, that always helps. But they come here and all of a sudden it's just not happening for them.
Yeah.
And it can be very disappointing. A lot of guys that came from small agency that came over to KCK were very disheartened because it just wasn't going to happen as quickly as they thought, especially the individuals like you're talking about. And I mean, I've been to like community colleges and different things and talked to students and, ask them, hey, do you have any questions for me? And some of them are like, how long do I have to wait to become a detective? Well, my answer to that is you're asking me that question. You're already setting yourself up for a heartbreak because it takes time. You don't get to become a detective right off. You have to do your road time. I mean, and a lot of times departments have a minimum amount of time you need to work the road. Some do not. Yeah. But it matters. You go out there, you need to dazzle them. Yeah. And sometimes, just those opportunities don't come up. You may not have a chance to dazzle them. A lot of the bad things that happen or the big things that happen where you get to be the hero, well, those are happenstance, man. It just
they all happen on your day off.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Happens all the time.
You can't control that.
Yeah. No. I mean, sometimes it's like after I get home, something big happens. And so, no, you may not get that opportunity to be in the spotlight. And it's very disappointing for a lot of people.
What advantages would there be to lateraling to a smaller department?
It really would depend upon your amount of experience that you have. You're pretty much always going to take a pay cut. Okay. We pay pretty well. So if you're going to a smaller agency, unless it's in a part of the country where the pay is just generally a little higher, and we have seen people do that.
Which also means probably cost of living is higher.
Yes, yes. So that's a chance you're taking. But say, for instance, you're going to another department, a smaller department, and let's say in another part of the country to be closer to your spouse's family.
Right.
Okay. Maybe mom and dad are, they have property and mom and dad are, in declining health. So some of the advantages is that when you walk on, you've already got a whole wealth of experience. You're doing lots of different things, and including working for better or for worse, a lot of violent crime.
Yeah.
We have a considerable amount of violent crime here in KCK, so you're going to have that experience working the shootings, working the suicides.
And working at a higher tempo.
Oh, much higher tempo.
Yeah.
And for instance, one friend of mine had left KCK and went to another agency, an adjacent, more rural agency.
Yeah.
And one of the things he commented on is, number one, that the tempo was much, much slower. So he's able to get in the car and actually kind of drive around and get to meet people. I mean, in the rural agencies, you get to know your folks. You might actually stop by the barbershop and just sit down and chat for a while.
Yeah, different dynamic.
Much different dynamic, but also when something bad happens, bad things still happen at those small agencies. And when they do, when you have somebody that has a lot of experience, real world experience doing those sorts of things, I mean, it really helps the agency out a lot because this person's already done it. They've already seen these things and they know what to do. In their own brain, they can already go through all the steps they need to go through about who do I call?
Yeah.
CSI.
It's an advantage over everybody else there who
absolutely.
may not be prepared to make that kind of decision because they don't typically have to.
No, they don't. And you're absolutely right. I mean, those are those opportunities. And sometimes, you might be on an on-call basis, which I was in Liberty. Sometimes as a detective where, you get called in because something bad happened. But again, if you've already got that kind of experience, that might actually help you promote at a different agency. Right? Now that you've already got this wealth of experience, say a position comes up, we need, somebody, we need to promote a new detective, you could probably ease right into that slot.
And at a different time in your career, a different season of your life, it may be more desirable to be in a spot where you're wearing multiple hats.
Sure.
That might actually be something you would want.
Yeah, it's some people. I mean, especially if they're going back to their community. And, you gain a little bit of status on the department. You not only are you might be a supervisor, but you're also the defensive tactics trainer. You might be involved with the schools, doing a little bit of detective work on the side. I mean, you're really doing a little bit of everything, and some guys like that.
Yeah, so there's pros and cons.
Absolutely.
So how do you know when to start looking at another department?
Certainly, if you're feeling unfulfilled, you're not happy. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I was in Liberty. I just, nothing against the department. I had some great friends there, but I didn't feel fulfilled. I wasn't happy where I was. I wasn't moving anywhere. I wasn't going anywhere. I was still involved with some things there, but in terms of my day-to-day life, that there was no chance for me to improve myself. And I really have a hard time when I talk to corporate type people about this sort of thing, because they're like, well, I would just go march right into the chief's office and tell them they need to use me more. Well, that's probably not going to work. I mean, we still kind of work within a paramilitary framework. So no, I mean, there just really was nothing else, nowhere for me to go within the department. Mm-hmm. So I had to kind of weigh my options. So if you're going to do something like that for career advancement, and the same goes for the people that, work for the feds, they want to do more. They want, go to the FBI, go to the Secret Service, a lot of opportunities there. Also, I mean, the money, you have to weigh the financials on it.
But you have to consider cost of living if you're going to go to another state or to another region.
Certainly. So you have to look at that sort of thing, the opportunities coming to a bigger agency like Kansas City, Kansas. Yeah, the pay is going to be a lot better than they're paying in a lot of the smaller towns, certainly in the metro. So, you weigh the finances, family life, what's my situation to where I need to go home. I need to go stay with mom and dad and take care of them, or you've got some other, or your spouse maybe has this really great job, better than yours, and you're getting transferred to, I don't know, let's throw a city out there, Chicago. Well, you may not be able to easily get on with Chicago, but chances are, I mean, Chicago has suburbs spread all over the place. Right. You might be able to get on with a suburban agency there, and you might have to start over again, but chances are the time frame is going to be a lot shorter. Maybe 2 years, there 2 years or a couple of years on the road, you might have an opportunity to do some different things. From
your experience, was it worth it starting over?
Yes. Yes, it was, but it wasn't painless. I mean, certainly there was, the financial aspect in the sense that I took a pay cut. I'm having to sell my old house that was right about that time of the housing bubble, so I had a hard time selling my house. So financially, you had to tighten it up a little bit, and because KCK is kind of a rough place, the stress, I mean, it's high stress. There's a lot going on here. There were plenty of days I came into work, and from the time we had roll call, we were hitting it. I mean, we were out there pretty much full blast in the summertime, going to shootings, going to disturbances, seeing a lot of depravity and stuff going on, and you didn't get lunch, and sometimes you had to stay late. So there was, a lot of times where you got held over 4 hours. I mean, I think my first Christmas working here, somebody from the midnight shift called in, so I got ordered to work over. So the tempo certainly is high. So the stress level is definitely a lot higher. Yeah. But I was kind of going for that too. I think I kind of needed that. I was definitely hit a slump. I was 36 years old, which in law enforcement, I mean, you're hitting middle age. I mean,
right.
We don't work until usually 64, 65.
No, you don't see very many 70-year-old cops.
No, that's another thing from TV. No, we don't. And another kind of myth from television is that you'll have this NYPD detective just transfers to LAPD, to Los Angeles, all the way across the country, and now he's a detective.
Same job. Same rank, same everything.
Absolutely ludicrous. It just does not happen that way.
No, if you move, you probably will have to start over in some fashion.
Usually, yes.
The pros and cons will be different wherever you go, but there will be pros and cons.
Absolutely.
What are bad reasons to move?
And it actually, it's sound kind of ironic, but it's kind of related to some of the good reasons too.
Okay.
In that I want to promote, I want to do these kind of things, but there might be a reason you're not promoting at that other agency too. All right. I mean, there might be some personal things up with you.
Right.
So, I mean,
it may not be everybody else's fault.
No, it may not be everybody else's fault. I mean, it may be not everybody hates you. So I have seen a few officers, like I talked about, from other agencies that came here that were dissatisfied quickly because they figured that once they got here, it's just going to happen, man. It's just I'm going to come here. They're going to see how awesome I am. And no, man, you're not awesome. And so people that just decide, I hate it here. And we do there is a phenomenon in law enforcement they call, I don't hear the term much anymore, but I used to hear it a long time ago, gypsy cops, guys that just go from agency to agency. Yeah. Sometimes they'll have some baggage. So, they're running from something or they're just, kind of.
They've ruined their reputation somewhere maybe.
And they keep gassing out at different departments. They'll go there and they'll kind of run its course. And it's like, well, forget this. I'm going somewhere else. But eventually you run out of time. I mean, it's just like you're now 30-something, 40-something years old and starting over again in another agency.
I worry about that. I see there are agencies, especially when manpower is a critical issue like it is now, that there'll be agencies across the country that are like, hey, here's a $10,000 signing bonus. And people are like, oh, okay, I'll go. And I see that and I think, okay, that might be $10,000 in your pocket, but odds are it's going to cost you to move and to start over, and it's going to cost you financial, it's going to cost you stress-wise, it's going to cost your family. That $10,000 may kind of pale in comparison to what it actually costs you to move. And so I don't know that just because someone's going to put money in your hand, that's on automatic yes.
Sure.
for lateraling.
Oh, absolutely. And departments, have to be competitive now because we're all competing against each other.
Right.
It's not anymore. We're not just competing against Kansas City, Missouri, or Overland Park, Topeka. We're competing against Detroit, Los Angeles. I mean, we will get applicants from all over the country that come in here, and some of them are dynamite. I mean, but obviously we've had some issues here recently in law enforcement, so a lot of people. We're not getting as many new people. So hiring laterals was a way, and they did change the system here. Whereas before, I had to go through the academy again, and I did work a little recruiting when I was in the chief's office. So I would have people from other agencies call, and they're like, wow, I mean, your pay, your benefits look great. And they're like, but I have a couple of questions for you. I'm like, go ahead. And they're like, do I have to go through the academy again? I'm like, yeah, you do. And sometimes that was it.
Or they would ask. And that's been improved.
It has been improved to where now you may not have to go through a full academy at all. I mean, you may just reciprocity is what they call it. You might have to come here, especially if you're from another state, have to go through several weeks of reciprocity training, learning our state laws, learning our general orders and such. For people that are already Kansas certified, it may be a simple matter of just going through a little bit of, processing, obviously training, taking you to the range.
Yeah, we've had some laterals recently that have come through that reciprocal training and a reciprocity training, and they were on the street relatively quickly.
Right.
And so
and those guys generally do pretty well. I mean, we've had some that were really, really good because they hit the ground running. I knew the job when I came here. I just needed to know how
to do it here.
They want me to do the job.
Yeah, and that takes some humility.
Yeah, well, it does. Oh, yeah. No, I ate, especially in the academy, and that was part of the reason why I kind of tried to keep my mouth shut because I was eating some humble pie. I'm starting over, so for me, it was kind of an admission of some failures and shortcomings. I'm starting over just with them, but I was going through the same thing they were. So that's the one advantage, I think, for me coming over and going through the academy is nobody can say that I didn't go through the same thing they did. Right. So I haven't heard a lot of resentment, towards some of these other officers, but it is good to be humble. Come here. You don't know everything.
No. You certainly don't know how these supervisors want it done here.
Oh, certainly.
And so you can't know that because you're coming from somewhere else.
Oh, sure.
So you have to at least learn that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and you really have to learn your supervisors, what they want, what they expect.
What are some of the other questions that laterals or potential laterals were asking you when you were doing recruitment?
Well, obviously the big one too is, do I have to live in KCK? And we lost people because of that. It's like, yes, you have to live in Wyandotte County. That's still something that is in place.
Someday, maybe it'll change.
Well, hopefully Kansas City, Missouri recently changed theirs.
Yeah.
And
The residency requirement
Yes,
went
the
away.
residency
Yep.
requirement to where they can even allow officers to live in Kansas. At least when I was working in Liberty, I still had to live in Missouri, but now they allow to live in Kansas. We're not quite there yet, and most of that's just for political reasons.
Sure.
But we're working on that. I think that would increase our pool a little bit because guys that say live in Leavenworth County or Johnson County that don't want to move for some very specific.
Shouldn't have to move. They've already got roots in a community, and they're nearby. But
Well, the answer to that question is above my pay grade.
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Now, there's other jobs where it's by seniority, so they may.
KCK is a union shop, so
It is. Well, if you got somebody that, for instance, they are just dying to do CSI, that's a popular one. Back when the craze was there, they want to do CSI. Right. Well, here, that's a seniority job. That's a bid job. So I don't care how excited you are as a brand new patrolman here. The chances of you getting to CSI in 2 years are slim and none. We've had some people get lucky, so I tell people anytime some new exciting job comes out, hey, throw your hat in the ring. Sometimes you get lucky. Nobody else wants it or whatever. So put in for every job you can think of,
right.
But have some realistic expectations. No, you're not going to be a detective right off. All the TV shows where you have this rookie cop and makes this big score, and all of a sudden he gets promoted detective. That's not how it's going to happen here, and you need to be prepared for that.
I'm hoping that in the current environment we're in, where we need to retain people in law enforcement, that people who are unhappy, they've hit a wall in their current department, or maybe the politics of their city is just particularly undesirable, that they can lateral over to other agencies and continue their law enforcement career, that they would still be contributing to law enforcement, just maybe not where they were. And that would, be an opportunity. They wouldn't have to leave. They don't have to go sell insurance. They can still be in law enforcement. They just maybe need a change of venue.
Oh, certainly. And if it's in your blood, so a lot of us, and even some of us disgruntled ones, when I hear about some guy who, like you said, wants to go sell insurance, I'm like, how? I don't know what else to do. I've been doing this.
How can you not be a cop? Right.
And for some guys that leave law enforcement and say they've hit a certain breaking point where they're just not happy anymore, and we have to recognize that. That's a significant thing. Where if the job is no longer any good for your mental health or spiritual health, and frankly, that was one of my problems I had at Liberty. I hit a wall both mentally and physically to where I was just done. But I still wanted to be a cop, and I wanted to go someplace that would allow me to be a cop, but it would also allow me the opportunity to advance. So if you have a guy that's really having a hard time, then look at the options. Look at what you got out there. Apply with a couple of different, but look at where you're interested. For me, it was going to be a bigger agency, more opportunity, but I was still going to have to work for it. I wasn't going to be able to stand on my own laurels. They're not going to promote me just because I'm Steve Smith. Okay. If anything, it kind of hurt me a little bit coming from a different agency because sometimes there's a little bit of institutional snobbery. Well, if you're not a cop here, you're not really a cop. And I've even had people say to me, we don't care what you did over there. None of that means anything. So don't even talk about it. Well, I know that's not true, and some other people know it's not true, but you have to be able to bring those skills with you, and you kind of have to leave some of the bad stuff there.
Well, Steve, I'm glad that you lateraled over to KCK. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
I'm so thankful to Steve for coming in and talking about this. I know that he has the same desire that I do to help young cops make better choices in their law enforcement careers. Now, if you've hit a wall or feel stuck, please do this. Do an inventory of the kinds of changes you can make. Can you try a different shift? Can you do a different part of town or a different type of job within the department? Try to change gears before you change cars. And a common mistake will be blaming your unhappiness on the environment around you when it's actually something inside of you that needs to be addressed. Make sure you check that first. But let's assume that you've addressed all of these things and that you've made a genuine effort to bloom where you're planted. So the next step will be looking at other departments. Life has chapters, and your next chapter might be in a small town agency wearing lots of different hats at the same time. Or it might be going to a bigger agency for more pay, more action, and more options. But that's going to depend on what you and your family need. Do not make this decision based on the gripes of other cops. Instead, find somebody who is not griping someone who has wisdom that you trust and can look at your situation and help you make this decision. If you like what you heard here, please share this episode with a cop or someone who loves a cop. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
Going into a situation which, as police officers were trained to watch the hands, watch the waistband, because that's where things are that'll hurt you. And I'm sure in his mind, he's responding to this guy is doing something that's potentially going to attack him or assault him. He's going to pull a gun, he's going to pull a knife, he's going to pull something that's going to hurt me. And to work through that, I'm sure his thought process was, thank goodness I didn't shoot that guy, because obviously that wasn't his intent, And so that close call, that near miss, that, situation where he's probably dealing with in his own mind of, this could have gone very badly, because it would have been inappropriate to shoot this guy.
The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. Thank you for listening today, and as always, pray for peace in our city.